being a guy that played in a dome, being a guy that played in Arizona, I have no way to get ready for those conditions. And so you can say all you want about home field advantage, and that's why you play. Well, no, because the Patriots can come to Arizona, and there's no difference other than we have our fans, obviously, but they can play in my weather. I can't play in their weather because I can't get used to it. There's nothing you can do to get used to cold weather in a situation.
So that's a more or less of the same. So, Mikey, this is kind of what
I love that.
a couple weeks ago. You love it, okay? I think it sounds super whiny.
Yeah. No, okay. He's breaking it down logically because it's not about whining. It's if I did have an ability to train and get ready for that, like if I had an ability to go practice in the snow, I would. But physically, it's impossible to.
Disagree. Totally disagree here. It's not a physical impossibility.
It's not fair.
What are you supposed to do?
Get on a plane and go into the element and start practicing for that week in that element.
Right.
Like these organizations are rich enough. You're able to spend the money. Yes, it's a hindrance to the team. It's a hindrance to the team, but you get in the right time zone earlier. You're not dealing with jet lag. You're doing all that kind of stuff. You're practicing in the weather that you will inevitably play in. So like there are ways you can do this. Also, you're a football player, man. And if you have a problem with this in the playoffs, like maybe you have some credence there, but then have the same sort of energy during the regular season. If you're really complaining about this, like, why aren't you complaining about a snow game with Cleveland and the Steelers in week 8? Like, is that not the same situation? Like, you want a dome over that? Or is it only in the playoffs?
It'd be cheaper than to bring teams a week before the games and then put them in hotels and manage all that. It's such an expense.
If you're an owner and you really want the W.
It would literally be cheaper to just build domes of the stadiums.
Well, okay, all right.
It would be cheap. It would cheapen the game too. So, like, this is what it bothers me, and it frustrates me that an Iowa guy like Kurt Warner would say something like this. And there's an element where he benefited by playing in a dome for sure, absolutely. That's you can't really deny that. But at the same time, I'm surprised that he wouldn't have more of a traditionalist view because he's from the old school. And also, you have a decision as to which team you want to go to when you are at the level of Kurt Warner. Like, you could have chosen to.
Yeah, that's the cream of the crop of the NFL that has that decision. Most don't. Okay, when you say it cheapens the game, that's coming from a place you're saying that the value in the game is in the level of suffering versus the actual level of technique and play that's seen on the game.
It's a game of attrition.
You'd rather watch guys.
A game of attrition.
It's about like advanced technique,
instant gratification,
fine tune versus just the bruteness.
The reason why football is as big as it is because fans have grown to love to see people overcome things that are incredibly difficult. And yeah, you can say mano y mano, it's really hard to break a guy down or catch a ball in a certain way. But if it's in a dome, like, you don't have that element that both people are striving to fight against at the same time. Like, it's removing the essence and the love of the game for the sole purpose of entertainment. We have fallen way too far in that direction in society, and I don't want to see that happen in NFL.
Okay, let me ask you this. Going from leather helmets to real helmets, do you think that was a step forward or a step back for the game?
At this point, you know my answer. I actually think it's become okay. It's when a good becomes a detriment. Ultimately, there was it ultimately became a bad portion of the game because now as we were talking about earlier on in the game, we now have these calls and these plays that are being thrown out there that shouldn't be thrown out there because the game elevated to a point in which people thought they could use helmets and their pads in weaponized manners. Whereas if they didn't have those things, they wouldn't use their head as a weapon because they would be knocking themselves out and not being able to play the game. They'd have CTE in 2 seconds and all that kind of stuff. They've lost the element of being able to tackle properly, wrapping up, taking to the ground, and they just shoot themselves out like a rocket.
Which point in the development of the sport do you think it went too far? It's like original football didn't have the forward pass, okay? And then we had this protective equipment that we're talking about here, and then a more and more advanced development of offensive schemes and defensive schemes and training techniques and nutrition. So when does the development of the sport turn into a negative?
I hearken it back to the actual pads and the helmets. Initially, okay, yeah, it was perceived health and perceived protection, but ultimately we can look back and realize that wasn't the case.
Scott, your affinity for rugby is showing again. Okay, all right, stop.
That's how far back my traditionalist thoughts go.
Yeah, I know you're trying to turn football into rugby. Can we let's keep?
No, we can still keep the forward pass.
Let's keep the pads, forward pass. Okay,
yeah,
forward pass and pads. How about that?
Yeah, we'll figure it out for the NFL. They
Okay.
should sign us on as consultants.
Yeah, for their padding, for their locations, and for their officiating, huh?
They couldn't afford me.